My name is Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at IIBA.
And I'm Scott Bennett. I'm the Manager of Business Analysis here at IIBA. We're here with a special session about business data analytics.
Today we're talking with Keith Ellis from IIBA. He's our Chief Engagement and Growth Officer, and David Marco, and we are talking about achieving more with data. This is kind of the after party for the webinar that we just had, really well received. And I think we had a whole lot of people, maybe even some people that couldn't join us for that webinar. But if you're here today, and you want to ask questions, just put it in our LinkedIn chat. We're also, we're kind of chit-chatting amongst ourselves, but we also want to take questions from you if you've got any.
Yeah, I was really interested. There was a lot of excitement there, as you said, a lot of questions. So I was helping to intro the webinar there and manage some of the questions. And we had over 40 questions that came through. Great engagement. So one of the ones I'll just start off with is, can you describe the role of a business analysis professional in the data analytics space? So I mentioned in the webinar that I have a certification in business data analytics. CBDA is an IIBA certification, and it's designed for business analysis professionals to learn a specialization. And you and I have talked about this before. We have specialization. So as a business analyst, you're an expert in talking to business people, technical people. The data analytics space is really just a different technical portion of that equation. So it's understanding data analytics. So the first part in getting into this space is really understanding what data analytics is all about. And anyone who has an IIBA membership has access to the guide to business data analytics. And in there, you will learn the foundations of that. I got my CBDA certification last year, and through that, I understood and learned how a business analyst works in this space. So we'll share a little bit about that today.
You've talked about getting your CBDA, that one of the realizations that you had is that you really did have to have a good foundation in business analysis skills, really to kind of understand that certification. And so I think that's an important topic. But even in today's findings, that was clear, that we're not just asking you to go out there and use some tools and use some data analytics techniques. Really, the value that business analysis professionals bring to that space is the business analysis skill set.
Yeah, that's right. Two of the key spots from my experience so far working in this space and studying the CBA are presenting results. So a whole bunch of people have spent a whole bunch of time analyzing data, churning that data, pulling out results, and you've got data in front of you. How do you turn that into a meaningful conversation with a VP, an SVP, an EVP, the president, and present it to them in a way that they can understand it? So, if we just go in and spend 20 minutes talking about all the methodologies we use to get this data together and pack it up, we're going to lose them. These are people that need something very specific. So in the CBDA guide, there are different techniques, and visualizations is one of those areas that talk about different techniques and how you present this stuff. My favorite is the 3-minute story. So if you contain everything that you found and put it into a 3-minute story to talk to an executive, you're going to focus that message down to the very meaningful things. So that's one aspect. The other part is on the front end of this, similar to writing requirements. If you don't understand the right problem, you're not going to solve it. So in the data analytics space, it's really about understanding what the challenges are. What's the question that you want to ask? It's not what people are asking you. Dig under the covers. What's the question that really needs to be asked here, so you get the right answer that's going to help you?
In that webinar, I think David modeled exactly what you're talking about. He was talking about the data by telling a story, and I think that's part of this skill set, is that you do need to be, you've got to get above just the findings in the data, but you've got to be able to connect it to a story. Yeah. So I'm looking at my notes because there was a ton of good stuff that came out of there.
Yeah, one of the themes that came out of it is a lot of this has to do with organizational change.
Mhm.
understanding data literacy is one thing, understanding the root cause of the problem, but a lot of organizations need to become data driven. It's part of culture. So why don't we bring in David and Keith on this topic here, and we'll just start asking more questions. So on that cultural piece, if you're in an organization that doesn't understand the value of data analytics, but you're sitting there and you're seeing lots of potential, where do you start the conversation?
Great question. Cultural change is the hardest thing part of what we do, because it's easier to program a computer than it is to program a person. They work totally differently. To me, what I like to try to do to start, you ask a great question, Scott, how do you start the conversation? I like to ask people, business people, so I have a secret question I'm going to give out. It's my favorite question that I ask people. I like to joke, Scott, you've just been named the president of your company. Congratulations. You don't get any more pay, but you do have to work a lot more hours. If this magically happened, what would keep you up at night? What would be your biggest concern? And I love starting there, because I have gotten some of the most genius answers. I'll give you an example. I can't give the company name, and you'll realize why when I give the story. Fortune 15, massive company, 4 gigantic lines of business. The person looked at me and said, if there is ever technology that does away with the printer cartridge, we would be out of business. So I think we could all, I have an iPad on my desk. We could visualize this kind of tech. I mean, what a statement. A Fortune 15 company at the time is dependent on the printer cartridge, because 3 other lines of business bled red, only one made money, and it made money on one product line. Wow. That is gold when you are trying to help facilitate change within an organization. So that's my secret question. I'm giving it out for free. What can I say?
I think one of the big ones, Scott and Susan, it's, you don't wake up one morning and say, today I'm going to change culture, and then by 5 o'clock it's done, right? It just, it doesn't work that way. And so, it's even if an executive, a CEO is saying, we have got to be data driven, and they're pontificating, we got to be data driven. At the end of the day, it's still dollars getting invested, but also people seeing value, right? Because it's that idea of, yes, I feel this is critical, but you got to help me. You got to help me solve a real problem. And then by people seeing the result of it and saying, wow, the way we did this, look what else we can do. It's that cycle of, yes, as an executive, I can push only so far. I can push and bring people to some ideas. But then at the end of the day, it's that idea catching fire and really igniting conversation, saying, look at how this changed our business. Look at how this made us more efficient. These are the next things I want to do. And then all of a sudden that CEO saying, look, we've now achieved these things. Now look what I can take forward to advance further. So that takes time. It's not a 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I've got a 5 o'clock shadow, and therefore I have to change culture, right? Well, sorry, that doesn't apply to you, Scott, but we'll work on that one.
Keith, can I jump on that a little bit more? I love this point. One of the key things in organizational change management, maybe the most important lesson I can give to everybody out there: God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that relationship. In fact, pretend you have 10 ears. Shut your yap, ask good questions, and truly listen. One of the most valuable classes I ever took, years and more years I want to admit, it was a Stephen Covey class, The 7 Habits. And it had this great thing on empathic listening. And I was so lucky because I got to be the listener in the exercise where they took 2 people with completely opposing views. And my job was to convince the other person that I understood their point, even if I personally disagreed. Number 1, you're never allowed to lie because integrity is everything. And number 2, guess who's the judge? The other person. Yeah. And so you really learn to listen and reflect. Scott, you said this, Scott, I thought I heard you say A, B, and C. And you're like, hey, you got A and B right, but you missed C. Let me explain that to you. Okay. All right. I think I understand you now. Did you say C? Yes, you did. Okay, thank you. You know, that listening is seminal. It's just so seminal to organizational change management. Too often they look at me and go, oh, Dr. Marco, you have all of our answers. No, no, no. I know how to get us where we need to go, but I'm going to listen a lot more.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think business analysis professionals are generally geared that way because our job is so much in communication, facilitation, discussions.
Yes.
And we had a question here that I want to address. One person asked, what's the daily routine of someone who's working as a business analysis professional in the data analytics space? So let me just share a little bit about that. As a business analysis professional, it's still a lot of the talking to stakeholders. It's still a lot of talking to the technical resources. In this case, it's data scientists and data analysts. But in the guide to CBDA, it's a really good outline in terms of the cycle the data analysts go through. So I'll just go through the 5 points here. First is identifying that research question. So it's working with stakeholders to figure out not just what they're asking, what's underneath that, what's the real problem, the root cause they're trying to solve. Then it's sourcing the data. That doesn't mean you actually doing the work. It means working with the data analyst or data scientist to figure out and give them the parameters in terms of what you're looking for and giving them the context, because they might just be knowing the flat table data. You need them to give them the context to find the right data. And then it comes to analyzing the data. They're going to be pulling this information out, putting it in different charts, might be doing some technical visualizations to make sure it's right. And then it's interpreting and reporting those results. So this is where you need to take that data and figure out where's the meaning and how is it important to answer that question that we came up with at the start. So it's a cycle of going through that. You might end up struggling with getting an answer. You have to go back and you go through the cycle a few more times. But ultimately, the fifth one is using the results to influence the business. It's not saying, hey, I'm the expert and you should do this. It's here's what the data is telling us and here are recommendations forward. It could be that it's a change in a sales process. It could be, venturing for new products. It could be a gamut of things. But I hope that gives you a flavor for what a business analysis professional does in this particular space.
As you're talking about that, I'm also thinking about some of the challenges that business analysis professionals sometimes have in their organizations. And I think sometimes when we get the question, how can I get into data analytics? They might be dealing with their own kind of cultural problems. So one of them, I think, is our business analysts, they just collect requirements. I just send them out and they write down what the business says. And clearly in the data analytics space, this is not a go gather requirements kind of a thing. And I'm using that gather requirements because I know it's like nails on a chalkboard for us. This is really, what your work is part relationship. It's part building trust. It's asking those good questions. I think one of the other challenges is that in many organizations, BAs are on the technology side. They are seen as leading, a systems piece of a solution. And in fact, what we're talking about here with data analytics is when you've got those business analysis professionals focused on the business side, that's when things can happen, because you're wanting that knowledge and translation of things like business context, understanding processes, understanding the people that are doing the work, the objectives that they're trying to achieve. So, I think part of the cultural shift in order to get business analysis professionals in this also is looking at our own space and seeing how do we need to position our role in order to be part of these projects.
Yeah, that's right. And there were some questions that we got during the webinar. And for those of you who didn't see the webinar, David and Keith presented some really key research on how important business analysis is for data analytics. And what we'll do is we'll put a link in the chat here that you can see. The link is an infographic that shows you some of those key findings. So that should be helpful. We'll also include a link for you for CBDA. That's a certification in business data analytics. As I said, something I've gone through. I highly recommend it. Really gets your mind wrapped around this environment of what is data analytics. So we'll give you those resources, so they'll be helpful. Now, David, I've got a question for you that came through. I thought you could help us out with. Someone asked, what data-oriented tools should BAs have in their tool set? I know it's kind of a vague question.
Absolutely, it's a wonderful question, and of course it is a hard one because tools come in so many categories. Software, we always hear about software tools. People love asking me, oh gosh, what should we be using? Tableau, Click, Power BI, Well, but then also when we think of tools, I also think of skills that we have, things that we are capable of doing. Question for you guys, just something fun. And when you pick tools for yourself personally, find something that matches your own style. I'll give you an example. Did anybody here ever use the 6 thinking hats? Does anyone know what that is by chance? No? I'm so glad because I hate the 6 thinking hats. It was a requirements gathering technique. Back when 2 decades ago, when I was at a firm, and I stunk at the 6 thinking hats. Like basically, if somebody broke a rule, you put on a blue hat, it's like a police hat. I thought it was stupid. It didn't work for me. But there was a guy at my company named Marty. He rocked the house with the 6 thinking hats. He had this weird, he was like Woody Allen reincarnated as a business analyst, and which is a terrifying thought. And he was outstanding with the 6 thing. And if you think I'm kidding, I am not kidding. He was amazing at it. Me, I stink at it. I'm glad nobody knows what it is because I never want it to occur again. But I share that a little bit jokingly. I have plenty of other tools and techniques that I am good at, that I am effective in. I love speaking with people. I love listening to them. I have a bit of a skill where I can look somebody in the eye as I'm typing. So that high school typing class, money in the bank. So one of the things that is fun is finding things that really work for you. I like presenting in a group. I like talking to people one-on-one, but I know folks who they invite people for coffee to discuss different business factors, and they're amazing at it. So just got to your point on tools, find tools that work for you. Not all of us are great at everything. We wish we could be, but none of us are.
Yeah, this is not a prescriptive discipline that we're doing. And I when I used to coach business analysis professionals, I would say, this is half, knowing your stuff, knowing your framework and your techniques, but it's also half style. So flex where you're really good at stuff. So yeah, agree totally.
And Susan, and learn your business. One of the things I do, I'm a lifetime consultant, so I always jump from organization to organization. Like first time I met with Homeland Security, you can't see my desk. I had a stack of articles I printed from their leadership to understand what is their mission, what are they talking about. It's no different. Before you speak to your business, especially if you're speaking to a C level person, they probably have done interviews. There are probably articles with them. Go read them, go study, learn who that person is. I had one with the company, a CFO. He was a tennis player, and I actually tried out for my college's tennis team. And it was fun because we talked about playing tennis. I'm sure he was a better tennis player than I was, by the way. So it was just a really great way to bridge. So Susan, just to your point, I think it's so important that we sharpen those skills.
I've got another question for you guys. One that I looked at and thought, ooh, this is a tough one. How do you see data management, data architecture, data governance functions working with business analysis?
Oh gosh, what a great question. This is a topic so near and dear to my heart. So let me answer it maybe simply. I'll first give a brief answer. To me, I see everything holistically because I've done this for such a period of time. We need a great, I mentioned the story of the hospital. They needed to have top grade life and death analytics. First thing we said is, hey, we need to get our data governance and our metadata management right, our data management right. Because if that data is not trustworthy, accurate, and understood, we're never going to be successful. I'll give you a good example. We have to define sodium. Now, that's on the periodic table of elements, right? Like we should have this one, 26 definitions of sodium because they would change one little molecule, these great doctors. And so I share this because to me, they all work in concert. If you don't have these capabilities and functions within your company, it hinders us in a cavalcade of ways. And I could keep talking, but Keith, I know this is near to your heart too. So
It is, yeah. Like I think there's a tendency to think of these things as separated. The whole idea of business architecture, data management, data strategy is being separated from project and project execution, and they're not, right? They're actually two sides of the same coin. So if you've got a business analysis professional who's thinking, wait a minute now, the end result of my analysis and work in the business is to shift processes. Well, if we're shifting processes to make them better at driving the data that we need, and the processes are actually driving better quality data, then we are moving toward a better state long term. And it's about all these pieces working in concert, to David's point. They're mirror images of each other. As we shift the processes, are we updating our metadata management? Are we improving through the shifting of the processes the quality of the underlying data, the data check, the data health, the data work that we're doing? Is this evolving in concert with our broader strategy? And is that strategy being articulated to the business analysis professional, who's then working through those pieces as the organizational team? Because they're going to see the opportunities. They're going to say, well, we want to work on this definition of customer. Well, we've got these types of projects going on. So as we see business value executing, it's really where the rubber hits the road, where the investment happens is in the project layer sometimes, right? And that's where we say, how do we keep that business analyst, at the analysis professional, at the forefront in there to drive both of that and view the project being done until we really start bringing these metadata pieces together and the data architecture pieces together.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, there was a body of work that I did when we were standing up our practice internally at IIBA, and I held workshops where we defined terminology. So for us, what is a member, as an example? Across organization, people had slightly different views on that, whether they were very technically focused or otherwise. And so that is a good starting point, I think, in an organization around this is, how do you define these things? We had some really rich conversations on topics that took us 30 minutes for one definition. But what came out of it was everyone around the table had a really good understanding and a better understanding of the organization because of that. So that was an example of an exercise that I think really can help changing the culture, help contribute to it, in terms of people understanding and coming to a common understanding on things.
Well, and so much of this, Scott, is also driving that layer of data literacy, right? We don't see necessarily data literacy as something that's trained or not trained inside an organization. You see it as a moving target of people understanding more and more and more about how what they're doing impacts data quality, what they're doing impacts the data that's being used, and understanding more and more about how the data can be used to power the business. It's that type of conversation that you facilitated, within IIBA that says, we don't have necessarily a conversation around what is an organization and what are the elements of that, and therefore standardized and potentially stabilized definitions of some of these things. You scale that up to 100 million, 2 million, $400 million organization, you get bigger issues, where you've got, 9 different definitions of, what are our payment terms? Is it net 30? Is it 30? Is it 30 with some sort of thing in behind? Like, what are we really talking about in here, right? It's easy to get to.
Yeah.
Keith, you bring up such a great point of how we really have to make sure that we up our data literacy, because anytime I hear from a company that says, hey, our business users are happy to put in, poor values in fields or incorrect amounts because they just want to get through an edit check, that screams lack of data literacy. I'll give you one of my favorite examples for this. We had built for the FBI a counterterrorism data warehouse. So really interesting. But one of the problems we discovered was, and here's a little question for you guys. One of the key points of data that they get is from local police stations. Well, guess what happens when you arrest somebody who you suspect of terrorism? They don't have normal IDs like you and I. They're like, their ID, you pick it up, LeBron James, and they're 5'3" tall. Well, I don't think you're LeBron James. So guess what these police stations, many of them would put in the perp name field when they didn't think they knew the person's name? Would you like to take a guess?
LeBron James.
No, I wish.
John Doe?
They would, yeah, John Doe. Now, Scott, if they did that, that would have made our life better. Many of them were putting in the name of the arresting officer.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Oops.
And why does that work? Because if we're all part of the same small police station and we arrest some guy and the name's Keith Ellis, we're like, oh, Keith arrested this dude, so we'll talk to Keith about him. But what happens when that's sent to the Hoover building in DC? Keith can't get on a plane. That's what happens. We get to break all the rules in the after party. So
That's right.
here's my question. How is business analysis going to evolve in the next 3, 5, 7 years? What do you guys think?
That's
Mm.
an awesome question, because what we're seeing is the skills are very much T-shaped or key-shaped, which is you have to have deep breadth in understanding of business analysis, but increasingly it's deployed to a specific domain, whether that be more agile context, or in this case, a business analysis context, or it could be deployed to a security context, or even RPA or something like that. So when you think about the context of business analysis, it's critical to all of these domains, and it shifts as you look at the techniques. But you also look at it from the perspective of the underlying skills. It really codifies things like business acumen or technology savvy, because it's codifying how do I approach that domain as a professional, right? How do I really understand business savvy? Well, it's not just do I read a balance sheet or an income statement. It's like, how do I interact with and understand business process, right? How do I interact with and understand and instantiate change as an executive? So you start seeing more and more professionals at the top echelons of organizations coming from that business analysis background, and you see a bit of a bifurcation. So I think what we're seeing is business analysis is a profession of change. I mean, that's in the very definition of a business professional, right? That need to change at an ever faster pace is at the core of what we do. And that need to instantiate a more and more sophisticated understanding of this capability of change will be at the center of what we do, as will the context of change. So it's a number of dimensions. It's the maturity of practice and capability that we need to rethink. It's this stepping away from old school ideas of what it was 20 years ago. It's like saying, oh, I don't like computing because an AS400 was bad. Well, you kind of get off the 20-year-old thing, right? Like we're into a different profession today. Now let's focus in on what this profession really does is instantiates change with a degree of precision. And that really is the future of organization. We saw it loud and clear today in the discussion on business data analytics. If you don't have this working and driving in your organization, you're on the wrong bus going in the wrong direction at a point where you cannot mess this up, right? So it's really important, I think, also on the business analysis professional side to step up to that, oh my gosh, this world really has a depth of skills that I need to deepen myself in, and that creates a rich environment of change and success for a lot of people. But Scott and Susan, you've spent a lot of time talking with, I don't know, I'm betting you've talked to 400 of our members individually at this point in time in the last
Yeah, it's well over 300 at this point.
What do you think those people are saying from your
Well, what I'm hearing a lot about from our members is that job title of business analyst is going away. And for many of them, they're working in agile organizations, or they're working in organizations that are restructuring to do more digital transformation or data analytics projects, and they're feeling a little left out. And so I think that business analysis becomes less of a role, less of a job title, let me put it that way, and it becomes more of a role. It becomes a service that can be deployed within organizations. And so I think our organizations have to be thinking about business analysis. There is always somebody that needs to solve a problem, and there's always somebody that needs to come with a methodology in order to ask the hard questions, do that analysis in order to provide the organization with that information. Business analysis professionals, having that foundation is critical. That does not go away in any organization. And so I think we should we really do kind of have to help our members to stop focusing on the title and thinking more about, hey guys, you're problem solvers, you're organizational change experts, you're helping us transition into some other future state, and we need those folks. So I think that's where I'm seeing the profession go.
Well, and I think, Susan, to your point, like there is a little bit of morphing. There's always going to be that push of let's call it something else, and in finance, there are payroll professionals. I'm a payroll professional, but I'm a finance professional. I'm in that business of finance. So invariably we are in the profession of business analysis, and there's going to be a degree of variation under that. And it's a bit of a game, what do we call in that within an organization? Senior consultant, is another titles, but let's step away from that. It is a business analysis professional, and to some extent it's that assistance to our own profession to stop calling it something else, because there's always going to be that weird war of the words, right? What do we call this? It's just a reality.
Yeah, if I look at my job titles over 20 plus years, I probably had 12 different job titles, all different. That's going to continue to evolve. Job titles will. That's just the way business is. But in terms of the fundamental skills that we have, our unique ability to connect with people, understand what their needs are, that's never going away. The ability to communicate those needs to get the successful outcome the business is looking for, that's never going away. I've managed 3 different business analysis teams. On my last team, I had someone who was interested in cybersecurity. And in our organization, we had a small cybersecurity team. So I assigned him to all the requests that were coming through. And he quickly learned that and came up to speed and loved the space. So he was doing business analysis the same as the rest of my team members, but just in a different area. And cybersecurity, as people know, is really important. It has really come to the forefront. And what I'm seeing is data analytics is as well. Keith, for those that weren't on the webinar, you had mentioned the demand for this skill. Can you just reiterate that for the people that didn't see that?
Yeah, so inside our profession, specifically in business data analytics, it's the #1 skill. 41% of companies reporting that there is going to be a gap between supply and demand in the next 2 years. It's huge. It is the #1 thing. But even if you go outside and you look generally at education and business analysis, it's #6 right now and springing forward a lot in LinkedIn. And it's actually, a lot of demand is coming from people outside of our profession saying, I need these skills. I need business acumen. I need tech savvy. I need the layman's version to be able to communicate, with others in my profession, to do problem solving, to do the root cause analysis, because so much of that technique set is part of what our professional mantra is. I do need to, because I'm late for my next discussion. This has just been a fantastic after party. And Susan and Scott, thank you so much for hosting it and inviting the 2 of us to participate. You guys have done a number of these things before, and I love watching the both of you do them. So I really appreciate everything, but I do have to drop on this one. And David, I'm sure there's many other questions that you guys could be continuing in your conversation over the course of the day.
Thanks for joining us, Keith. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
And we can keep going. We actually, I think, do have a question. So how about I go there?
Fire away.
All right. So, so this person is asking, I have a background in statistics. I work as a data analyst, and I've passed my CBAP. So they've got their business analysis certification in 2019, and have not gotten a BA job since. What do I need to do? And so let's assume that's the only part of the question I have. So let's assume that this person is asking, how do I take this set of skills and experiences and certifications, and how do I get a job in the data analytics space, or how do I get assigned to data analytics projects?
Scott, would you like to go first? And then because I have a couple things I want to say. I've been interviewing lots of people of late, so I have some impressions for the person too.
Yeah, I'll answer it from a BA manager perspective. Just in general, the way to successfully land a job is not by looking on Indeed and spending hours and hours and hours of that. You need to get in front of people. Our profession, business analysis, is really, it's about connecting with people. So connecting with people at conferences or chapters. IIBA has 120 chapters around the world. virtually connecting with people. These relationships are going to get you much, much further in terms of finding a position than otherwise. But David, you might have some specific suggestions in this data space?
Absolutely, Scott. I had a feeling you'd go in that direction. It's so accurate because first off, it's about finding opportunity. And Scott, you brought that up. Speak at your local chapters, talk to those folks. You might be shocked at what a great opportunity you get. But the second thing is be prepared for those opportunities. If you are in the top 20% of whatever it is you do, you will never look for work. Have you really put in that work on your skills? And then when you get that opportunity, don't just show up to the interview. Have you spent at least 2 hours studying that company? So if I'm interviewing with a federal agency, did you write out their mission? Do you have it committed to memory? If you're interviewing at a corporation, what are their corporate goals? What business are they in? Have that in your back pocket for those jobs that you really want. Because guess what? Once you make those missteps at the beginning, you don't get to make them again. So be prepared for that interview, be professional, engage, ask good questions. I have to tell you, when I interview folks, I have half my questions are on skills. My other half is on psychology. I'm trying to get things like, how does this, like one of my favorite questions is, what is your greatest professional failure or disappointment? I want an honest thing. What's the one of my other favorite questions? What's the most valuable piece of professional feedback you've ever gotten?
Mm.
Oh goodness, I would have dozens of examples where somebody said, "Hey, David, I have this. I think you could be doing this better, or you shouldn't be doing this thing," and you walk away really learning from that. So I love those kind of questions too. So be prepared if you're somebody interviewing. Make sure that you put your best foot forward. Do that research. Study at least 2 hours for every 1 hour of interview, because it'll make the difference in the hire or no hire. And if you want the job, let the person know.
You know, I wrote a blog. I was just reading this blog last night that I wrote, and it was talking about applying business analysis to your own job interviews. I mean, essentially, if you want to go into that business analysis space, one of the key skills that you need to have is interviewing. You're
Yes.
interviewing your stakeholders, and so you've got to be prepared. You've got to show up and know your stuff, and you've also got to be able to ask questions back. So you're sort of modeling who you are as an analyst when you go in for those jobs. So just turn that skill set into your to your job interview to prepare. Let's see.
So,
I'm taking a look. I don't see any more questions, but I did hear, because we've got our control desk that we've got going on, that there's actually a lot of conversation about data analytics happening in the LinkedIn chat itself, which is fantastic. And I think that mirrors what the webinar was like. There's a lot of energy around this, so I'll kind of end where I started, which there's a lot of energy around this right now. And the members that I talk with, because they are seeing such a change in their job titles, there's a real concern that organizations are moving away from business analysis. But I think that is misplaced. And so I think today just adds additional evidence that nope, we still make a difference in organizations.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you that missed the webinar, if you go on the IIBA website and look at the webinar description, the recording will be posted there. So that's where you can find that. And we do have a few more related webinars coming up. Is that right, Susan?
We do. In fact, some of the findings from the Achieving More with business analysis, I think applies well to tomorrow's member webinar. So we've got a cybersecurity expert. Her name is Helen Patton. She's literally just written a book on the cybersecurity career path. She's an advising CISO at Cisco. And she comes from a business process background and went into cybersecurity. And so I think that is another great one. So if you haven't registered for that, do that. And then we've also on Thursday, Keith was mentioning that he's going to be speaking at the Vancouver chapter, talking with a local practitioner who is a CBDA and does data analytics work. So I think it is out in our chapter events. if you're a member, you get to participate in our chapter events, anywhere in the world. So check that one out. Oh gosh, and then we've got, I call it Adventures in Data Analytics. I don't have it on the website yet, but coming up, I think it's February 23rd, we're going to have another, he's a data scientist. His name is Gary Edwards. He's actually helped us with our data projects. He rocks. And he's going to talk more about the findings from this research, but he's going to do it through a series of stories. Again, David, I think, I said it before, you really model, I think, one of the important skills that somebody doing data analysis has to have. You got to be a good storyteller.
It's all about that. And I love, Susan, I wanted to chime in on this. I love how you describe the profession as problem solving. That's exactly what it is. You're not there to just construct a sales report. You're there to solve a problem, and you got to get to root cause. So I just think that's so. I could care less about titles. I love the problem solving one, because that's really what we're doing. If we're not solving a problem, what is our purpose?
That's right.
Yeah.
One of our members said, that person that you talk about when you have a problem that you're going to call, I'm that person. And I thought, yeah, that is who that is. I think our members get it, right? It is more than just being kind of a commodity business analyst. I just go in and I just capture requirements, or I work on these systems. When you're moving into a space like data analytics or cybersecurity, your focus is really different from just going around and asking about requirements. It's a relationship business. It really is. So let's see. Any more questions? Okay, I do see another question out here. Let's see. Well, it's a little bit of an ECBA question, but let's see if we can't make it a data analytics question. So this is a person that's doing an international business management education. I'm planning to do the ECBA certifications. Will this help me to understand the fundamentals of business analysis? I know that we've talked a little bit about, data analytics is still built on top of a foundation in business analysis. Do you guys want to talk more about that, and how learning more about that would help or not help in this space? Scott, I guess I'll turn it over to you first.
Sorry, I was looking at our LinkedIn schedule, our LinkedIn Live session next one. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So the question on this, or maybe David, you should take it. Hey,
Sure.
That's the fun of being live. David, I'm turning it over to you.
Sure. When we're looking at working on this skill, I agree. You always go back to the foundation and to the fundamentals. You always do. I liked how one of the things that Keith talked about is that it's a profession of change. Oh goodness, this is a hot button for me. I've been in this field a long time. When I started, I studied. I got a chance to work with some amazing professionals who I learned from. If that field had not evolved, I would not be here. The day I wake up and there's nothing for me to learn, I will go do something different. And that is the beauty of what our field is about. It is constantly in change, but those basic fundamentals still will always carry you through. I like to joke, I also have a passion for football. Every football game is won by blocking and tackling. You block well, you tackle well, you're probably going to win the game. So as much as we could have a run pass option or a zone read, those basic fundamentals still carry the day. And I think that's true in our profession as well. Are we, to your point, solving problems? Are we willing to change and grow and learn new things? We have to in order to survive. So I totally agree that foundation seminally important.
Yeah, I don't think you're so for the person that asked this question about whether they should pursue what is our entry level certificate in business analysis, even if you take that certification and you decide that you want to be a CPA, I still think that it will serve you well. I mean, Scott and I joke sometimes about applying business analysis to our lives or our careers. I mean, he's got a woodworking business, and I will tell you that he uses business analysis to identify problems and, content management and all kinds of things. It's just a good life skill that's really transferable no matter where you go with it. So yes. So to the
Yes,
person that
our,
asked,
our,
yes.
our director of chapters, Jared, he uses the example of a grocery list. A grocery list is a requirements list when you're on your way to the grocery store. And success looks like checking everything off on your grocery list. It's a pure, simple example, but we use it in our everyday lives.
Yep. Yep. Let's see. Okay, so now I think we are getting some more questions. Let's see. Um, okay. What do you do in a situation where the data in the organization is inaccurate? If you run a report multiple times and then you get different results each time.
Oh, let me welcome to my world. Let me begin there. So, regardless of how good your regression analysis is, regardless of how wonderful your data science formula is, none of it matters when the data is inaccurate and you don't know what the heck it means. None of it matters. And when reports differ like that, there will be no trust in the data. Much like the Boeing CIO said, hey, if our people trust the data, it's a game changer. I'm paraphrasing what he said. So to me, this is my world. Number one, how many data management consultants does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the bulb's got to want to change. So that's my data management joke. Anyway, so to that point, and I have no other data management jokes, by the way. There's only one. Anyway, so it's about first identifying the problem. I'll give you an example. Healthcare organization that was headquartered in the state of Wisconsin. In the state of Wisconsin, I think there's 72 counties, and their executives didn't believe they had a data quality issue. They thought their data was very accurate. So we profiled the data in just a small select number of tables. We found over 267 unique values per county for the state of Wisconsin. Folks, that's a table you download from a .gov site. What are we doing? So such a seminal example. So if your executives don't realize there's a problem, going to be a long road of listening primarily and then interjecting with those key points and doing your homework to help show that, yeah, this is a challenge. I think that's just such an important thing to do. If they do get it, I have a company today who I spend most of my day on, wonderful group of people. I had a chance to work with all of the entire executive board. So the president, the CFO, everybody. And one of the things that I really enjoyed was all of them stressed the importance of change. That, hey, if we're going to become the company we want to be, we have to change. So when I present it back to them, I had this slide that had a quote, and I had every member of the executive board, one of their quotes on that one slide to say, hey, you guys have all said you're committed to this. And they have been committed to it. So just to your point, it's such an important thing. And it just helps really bridge that gap. So Scott, I'll let you jump in. There's so much to talk about on it.
Yeah, when I look at sort of the challenges that we've got coming ahead, it's I think there's a lot of potential coming up. So I'm just sort of looking at the time here, Susan. I think we're at the point now that we need to wrap up. So
Yep.
what I want to do is David, thank you for participating in the webinar. Really great information you and Keith presented. Thank you for joining us on this. It's really great to have an expert join us. Susan and I do these chats regularly, and I'll let Susan wrap up with our next session where we're going. But thank you again. Really appreciate all the input you've had here. And I'm sure people were really listening well to all the advice that you had to share.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it really has been fun, David. Thank you. Next time we're going to ask you about your MMA background, but not today. All right, we want to thank everybody for joining us. And hey, our usual Business Analysis Live session is coming up. It's next Wednesday, 10:30. We're going to talk about asking better questions. So we'll see you then. Same BA channel, same BA time. Take care.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll leave another one right here for you to help you in your business analysis career. If you haven't subscribed to the IIBA YouTube channel yet, you can click over here and click on the bell icon to get notified every time we publish a brand new video.